area is also. Yeah, I don't think we have a ton of time to stay on this slide, so I think talk about phenology, which is basically just the natural cycle or the clock that's when flowers bloom on certain things and the rate at which plants grow. Yeah, I would encourage you all to research it yourselves if ever any questions. Ask us. So.
Yeah, basically timing.
Oh,
yeah. Does it matter if we switch mics or? Oh, okay. So my turn. So a lot of people ask me, why do I care about native plants? And I still have yet to come up with a good stump response to that because there are too many answers. Because I started off with one thing and because I thought they would be easier. And then I thought, oh, but it'll attract butterflies. So there are a lot of reasons, but beyond what I want, there are a lot of far more significant reasons. So we know that lawns and just other non-native species take an enormous amount of work to keep alive. Does anybody grow azaleas? Do you have to amend your soil with something acidic? Or blueberries? I'm looking at Beth.
We're doing like an AC gardening, but like.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so no shame, it's okay. I don't have every plant that's not native in my yard either. But since these plants evolved here, they're perfectly happy with our heavy clay soil and some of them sitting in water ones sometimes, or some of them sandy soil. We've got a lot of different conditions in our region, but if you pick the right plant for the right place, it doesn't need us to pamper it. So we don't need to use fertilizer, we don't need to use pesticides, and those things become pollutants in our environment when we have rain and it runs off, then it goes out into our storm drains, and then it goes out into our bayous and then the Gulf, and we get algae blooms and things like that from nitrogen loads and all kinds of fun stuff. Anybody get frustrated with plants after a freeze? Lost a lot of plants, some of the freezes. I've been in Houston for about 20 years now, and I remember freezes being few and far in between in my early years here, and now it's like every year we have a big freeze event. I was getting really tired of covering plants and pouring pots inside. So that was one of the main reasons I'm going all native and they are all going to the ground, with the exception of projects in process, which I always have. But with this last freeze, I covered nothing in my yard except for my satsuma tree because that's not native and I want to eat it someday. They all came back. So it's much easier to keep them alive.
Much less inputs.
Yes.
And what we're talking about here is how expensive it is to maintain these monocultures.
Yes.
And, forcing things where they aren't from, it's easier just to align with what was. So.
Yeah, and the reason that monoculture becomes unsustainable is because that one plant takes all the same nutrients from the soil. If you, in the old prairies, you have some things in the pea family that fix nitrogen, and all the different plants require different things from the soil, so they all work together and rejuvenate the soil when they break down and die. So it all works together in the system, but when you just have all grass or all corn or all soy or whatever the agriculture is doing, then it's hard to sustain.
Diversity is strength.
Yeah. And mowing and edging is the bane of my existence because my HOA cares about that. They don't care what I have in my flower beds, but they care if I mow and edge on my sidewalk. But mowing and edging takes a lot of time and a lot of money and creates a lot of pollution. So this all adds up to a lot of impact because 93% of land in Texas is privately owned. So a lot of people think, well, isn't that what parks are for? I'm gonna go to a state park and see wildlife. But there's not very much of that land out there, y'all. And that adds up to a lot of pollution, a lot of monoculture, a lot of land that is not supporting much of anything except for us, but I don't think it'll do that much longer if we don't take better care of it. So lawn maintenance creates a ton of pollution. Running a commercial lawnmower for 1 hour produces as much smog forming gas as driving 300 miles. Those leaf blowers that drive me batty in my neighborhood, an hour of one of those is like driving 1,100 miles. They are not at all regulated, those small gas engines. I'm sure most of us have to take our cars every so many years or every year to get an inspection, and they check to make sure your car's not emitting too many noxious gases. They don't have to do that with these little things, and they produce so much pollution.
My man just kind of comment on that. think about how huge Houston is and how much lawn we have and how many, retention areas with grass and stuff too. Think about that to scale. How many landscapers we have? I don't know the estimate about it as at least 100,000. Landscape crews out there. It's absurd. We really are putting out clouds and like massive, out of the atmosphere. It's ozone. We really need to think about really what's sustainable to scale. So, I just want to say that.
Yep, no, exactly. And that's where that 93% comes into play, because that is almost all of our land. And if it's all lawn, like, we could be doing better as a society than using all of our land to pollute and to let water run out. Like, it's not helping us any. It's not doing anything for it. It's not providing any ecosystem services or any ecological services. And Harris County is bad, more than any county in the nation from fossil fuel pollution. So yay, Harris County, be proud.
Can do better.
So the reason that native plants, has anybody not seen this graphic before?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, cool, because this circulates around a lot. I'm sorry, probably driving Bob nuts here.
No, it's fine.
Sorry, Zoom people. Prairie plants, having grown in this environment, have been through droughts and freezes and floods and all kinds of crazy weather events in the thousands of years that they lived here. So they have developed deep root systems. So can you see this on the end here? This is turf grass. And I'm sure if you've ever played sod, I mean, sod is only a couple inches thick, right? There's not a lot of root structure there. But native plants have roots up to 18 feet deep, some of the prairie grasses. So those roots will allow the plants to survive a lot. They will hold resources. They will pull water into the soil that they can use for reserves later in the year when there's a drought.
So the erosion.
And they control erosion.
Huge. And hold banks and rivers. Preventing all the land from slipping away. That's essentially what Texas is doing. We're falling into the ocean very slowly. So these plants slow that down
Yeah.
in a significant way.
They let more rainwater infiltrate.
That's
Yes.
Infiltration as well. Yes, they
Yeah.
let more water in. It creates a sponge.
Yeah.
Unlike what our turf grasses do, other than buffalo grass. I recommend.
Yeah, buffalo grass is actually on the far right there.
My bad.
I know that.
This guy
Yeah.
here.
The advance or the-
So if you look, this is a really great name. This is buffalo grass, but if we tell them that that's one of these, they're just underutilized. You don't need to irrigate it. Can be, so it can be a little picky, but like where I work, shooting on some of the bigger properties like Generation Park and Springwoods Village, to the north and northeast, they got into establish large swaths and no permanent irrigation, only temporary and moving the water maybe a few times a year. Like you don't. It only gets about that tall, about 6 inches max. So a couple of mowings, seriously, take down the units.
Yeah, comment that, I mean, not that I'm advocating for it, but it's not too much, you actually need all the water before it can be applied. 10 months of the year, a lawn that's never watered looks exactly the same as that one that's started.
That is true. We do baby our turf grasses way more than these. That's true. Thank you. Yes. So she was saying that the roots of some grasses, invasive grasses like Bermuda, St. We'll get a little deeper if you don't baby them, but consider alternatives that still fulfill some of the aesthetic criteria, but also deep roots.
Yes.
And, our northern prairie.
Yeah. And then a lot of that water that doesn't get absorbed by your turf grass, what happens to it? This is a picture of my daughter's school, days after it's rained. And I look at that swale and I'm like, why is there still water sitting there for days? It rains, the water stands, it breeds mosquitoes, we all know mosquitoes, right? Or I'm getting there with it. Or runs off, and when it runs off, it carries all those pesticides and fertilizers that we put on the lawn into our water systems. Or if there's too much of it, floods. So this lawn that doesn't hold anything, it doesn't serve any purpose, I mean, it holds very little water. And this is an example in my yard, I'm gonna need their pointer quick. So this is a rain garden, thank you, Josh, that I put in my yard. So this is after it rained, took pictures on my phone and I noted the timestamps. So you can see the edge of the water here. And there's a little bowl, this was an area along the property line with my neighbors where there's already water collecting. So I'm kind of following the permaculture principle of working with what's going on in my environment instead of against it. And so I dug out a bowl here and you can see where the water is. And then an hour and 2 minutes later, you can see the difference, like the water was back here. And the water was all the way up here. And the water was, let me see, like over, all of this was full of water in just an hour. I mean, that, in my daughter's school, that sits for days.
By volume, that's more than 2/3 what was there. Just an hour.
Yeah, and by the next day, it would all be gone. But, so, and that was a young garden. Those plants are all pretty small. That was probably, if I took a lot of pictures, it was probably the year I planted all that stuff. So they were in the slow, sleepy season. If you haven't heard that about native plants, they sleep the first year, creep the second year, and leaf the third year. So this was their sleepy year. So, but even then, and I didn't amend that soil very much. I think I threw some expanded shale in there to absorb water, but it's not a rich soil, but it's holding water and those plants are soaking it up. Something else that those roots do is sequester carbon. So so all of those, they along with the water they pull down, they sequester carbon. This is a little basic chemistry. If y'all remember your chemistry, I won't test you later on it, but it's very simplified. Plants take carbon dioxide from the air, which is a greenhouse gas, which causes global warming, and water from the environment. They go through photosynthesis with the sun, and they produce glucose, which is what they need to eat, and oxygen, which they release, which is nice for us, right? Good relationship. So they're taking pollutants out of the air, and they can absorb some pollution for us, and water, they will filter water and clean some water as well. But they're helping sequester carbon, and those deep roots will pull down a lot of carbon. I mean, everyone talks about trees, but these native plants have big sensitive root systems too, and they can sequester a lot of carbon.
If I could add to that.
Yeah.
If the, if the rainforest is the lungs, along the equatorial zones, and remember the way it is, we also don't value seagrass enough. Commercial industry is a huge ball this way now, but a prairie, kind of more a younger system than what forests are, and debatably more man-made with fire in our interaction with it. But they think of it more as an underground forest. The canopy is down there with those roots. That's where all that carbon is versus, the tall trees of the Amazon. It's inverted, basically, an inverted forest is the way I think of it. And that's why it's not an appreciated system, it's the amount of not just sequestration, but because it's so cheap to just demo and build a strip mall.
Yeah.
We need another chunk of cheese, right? But it's not as
Yeah.
expensive to, people don't think about it. So.
And back to this slide as an example, I mean, this is the plant here, but then look at all this roots system, and there's more than half of the root system, more than half of the biomass of the plant is underground. And that's what enables it to survive our harsh climate, but also makes it susceptible to being taken advantage of. So another effect of this oxygen, this breathing process of plants, when they release that oxygen, they're breathing, right? They're taking in carbon dioxide and they're releasing oxygen. It has a cooling effect also. They open the stone on their leaves and release the oxygen and it cools the air around them. There have been some studies done in Harris County recently where they were doing heat island mapping and going around and with these little heat monitor cameras. So was anybody part of that study in here? No.
Nobody, I think it's one per slide.
Yeah. So there are thermal cameras you can use to take pictures, and this is in A-Leaf, Hackberry Park. So same area, the difference between the sidewalk, concrete, and the cool areas in purple was 28 degrees. So we know that the sun is hot, and when we stand in the shade, we feel better, but it's not just because the sun's beating down on you. It's because that tree's breathing and moving air, and the same is true for plants. And look at, this is the grass, so remember, no ecological services that I'm assessing that they don't do. There's very little difference between the sidewalk and the grass. The grass does not do a lot to cool you, right? I mean, if you lay on a lawn in the grass, you're still gonna be hot. I mean, it might not radiate as much heat as the concrete, but once you get under that tree, it's breathing and it's cooling you. Friends and trees. And then when we zoom out of that and we look at our whole city, you can see some areas where we don't have a lot of plant life. So they did this heat mapping, say this is, I think this is the old one, I think they updated it last year, but they found some areas, this is not far from us, this is Gulfton. I live just south of Gulfton, kind of down here. This was the hottest part of the land that they surveyed. I think they did most of Harris County. So these cool parts up here were the coolest. The difference in average temperature between Gulfton here and I don't know what that is up there, but this northeast section was 17 degrees on average, hotter in Gulfton. This is the same basic weather pattern system, right? This is not, this is maybe a, well, depending on traffic, a 45-minute drive, but 17 degrees hotter in one part of town versus the other, because it's all concrete jungle, sidewalks, parking lots, strip malls.
I have a picture I got from Jaime Gonzalez, so either he or somebody took it, of the MD Anderson Prairie. And it shows the difference between the turf grass, the sidewalks, the street, and the prairie. Yeah. And the trees. So I mean, the prairie is several degrees cooler.
And do you remember what the difference was? I think
I
that,
don't.
Prairie grass.
yeah,
Prairie grass compared to regular turf grass, I've seen up to 25 or 30 degrees Fahrenheit. That's huge, so.
yeah, and by the way, this, if you didn't notice this on the slide, this was taken when the ambient temperature was 102. So would you rather be 102, or would you rather be in like 80 something? Yeah.
120.
Yeah. Well, I've seen some projections that we're not very many years away from 120-degree temperatures, so we gotta clean up our act now. Okay, I think that's all. So this is probably the reason that got me into native wildlife or supporting wildlife with native plants. Kind of what drew me in, but then I started hearing terms like insect apocalypse. Has anybody heard that? Apocalypse. Yes.
How many of you have noticed much less butterflies and also bug splatter since maybe 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, bug splatter was like, thing, like.
All over the
oh,
windshield.
whoa. You could see after cars.
I forgot who I spoke to, but they were a member from here, and she used to live in Montrose, and she said that there were lightning bugs over there. I live in Montrose, there's nothing, there's like nothing there anymore.
Yeah, the bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame. I grew up catching those on my grandparents' property, was in Michigan, but I believe I saw one in my yard on my rain barrel during the day. And I took a photo of it, which I had to blow up, and someone on INET said, yes, I agree, that is the genus of fireflies. I'm still gonna like hang out at night and watch them come out, but it's probably 3 years of leaving leaf litter and doing nothing with it in my backyard. But our insects, I mean, that's a great way to feel that. I grew up in Michigan, but we would see that driving a few hours across state or even into Austin from here. It's just not the same anymore. You don't see it. 40% of all species of insects are declining globally. Almost half.
It is half in Texas now.
Is it
As
half?
of 2000, we've lost over 50% of our
Oh my
butterflies.
God.
So, and
Yeah,
a lot of birds, I mean,
Yeah.
that is related to, but up the energy pyramid, but over 50% of our butterflies, it's definitely part of why the monarch has been listed federally in the danger list as of earlier this year, I believe. So it's critical. We really need to plant milkweeds that are native, not the tropical.
and someone mentioned birds. This is kind of gets to that. This is all the plants are the foundation of the food web, right? Plants are the only organism family that can get energy from the sun. So as humans, we might not think we're connected to nature, but unless science figures out a way that we can directly harness the energy of the sun to fuel our bodies, I don't think anyone's working on that. I like to soak up some sun, but it doesn't put food in my belly, right? So we need plants to feed this ecosystem. So if we're talking about insects really are the next rungs. It's kind of a wackadoodle food web because it's trying to get livestock and crops and humans in there. But insects are the largest consumers of plant material. So insects are the first line of defense in collecting energy from the sun in the plants. Now we can eat the plants directly. Does anybody eat all plants? Okay, good. I strive to eat more plants, but I like a lot of other things too. But insects are very important in that. And then, I'm sure some of you here have heard of ductality. Birds are big eaters of insects and especially baby birds. So birds eat a lot of things. Birds eat seeds, bugs, depending on the species, they have their different favorites. But baby birds need caterpillars. They need soft-bodied insects because the parents like chew them up and spit back on the babies in some gross biological process like that.
Bug Gerber.
Yeah, or something down their throat, yeah. So, so insects are important. If people watch birds and they want to see birds, you need to have soft-bodied insects. And those are usually a lot of caterpillar species are larvae for something else that turn into something else. So you need to have host plants for those lepidopterous species. So chickadees, there's an entomologist, a few of you may have heard of, named Ductality. If you haven't heard of him, I highly recommend all this stuff. Anything like that, you can find them on YouTube and watch videos, whatever. If you ever heard the Talony rap, it's great fun. But you have to look that one up. But he made some for intern count how many times mommy and daddy brought caterpillars back to a nest because he wanted to know how much it takes to feed a clutch of birds. So anyone, okay, if you haven't heard this before, make a guess. How many, so for a one parent couple to raise one nest of eggs, how many caterpillars do you think they needed?
2,000.
You've heard this before, but you're still wrong. Yeah. Okay, between 6,000 and 9,000. Or one nest, I don't know how many eggs chickadees lay at once, but one nest, one season of baby birds, 6,000 to 9,000. I feel so bad for that poor intern that had to count that. I think.
So butterflies are facing that upward and downward pressure from chemicals in their food, and then also the birds who still eat, facing the same pressure. So
Yeah.
think about how critical each rung
Yeah.
is, how to help them. So lots to do.
And another thing that we don't think about with insects is that they are our ecosystem decomposers. I mean, if you ever turn over a log in your yard, there's something underneath it keeping it up, right?
Please wear gloves and.
But if we didn't have those insects doing that, what would happen to all that waste? Like, how would we get nutrients back into the soil? Those critters that decompose the logs that fall on the trees, that fall on the leaves, all of that falls on the ground, which we should leave in our yards, by the way, it's inside. It drives me nuts that people bag up their leaves and they send them out to the city to recycle, and then they go and they buy fertilizer. But the leaves are the fertilizer, people, and you don't have to get rid of them. You can move them.
Leave the leaves.
Leave the leaves. And lepidopterous species, butterflies and moths, many of them live in that larva. That's where the fireflies live. If you want fireflies, they live like 2 or 3 years of their life as a larva in leaf litter before they become the pretty sparkly magical.
Many native bees too, also.
Yeah, So we need all that, and we need that to put things back in the soil. And I think we're probably taking our time. So as far as humans go, aside from all that wonderful stuff of, the food web collapsing underneath us, the food we eat is pollinated by bees. And I'm not gonna go into honeybees because they're not native, that's a whole different system. Native bees. Native bees are an agricultural crop, basically. They move around and take them to pollinate things, but so all our people, like if the grocery store didn't have, this was what it would look like if we didn't have pollinators to pollinate. I mean, I hear stories about people hand pollinating their tomatoes. I didn't care that much to try to get up there with a Q-tip, but bugs do that work for us. We don't need to do it. So we need to support those soft-bodied insects and all of those species. And you can have 29 times more insect and wildlife diversity in your yard if you're using native plants. Bermuda grass just doesn't attract anybody. No one knows what that looks like to eat it. So, and this coevolution that we talked about, 90% of plant-eating insects I'm co-evolved to eat something specific. I mean, I have no reason I get aphids on it. Things come and eat the aphids and it's fine. But there's an oleander aphid that loves milkweed. There are hornworms that love tomato plants. There are things that have really specific relationships. And it's all part of the grand design, but we can't just plug things out of the ecosystem and expect it not to collapse underneath us. And it's also good for our mental health. There are a lot of studies about bird song improving your mood. If you follow me, like Japanese culture, they're in the forest bathing right now. They just go and they absorb the sights and smells and sounds of forest, and it's very soothing. Nature sounds. It's important for our kids too. Kids are more confident. Texas Children in Nature, oops, no. The Children in Nature Network has a lot of studies on their website. The kids do better in school. They're more confident. They're better problem solvers when they spend time outdoors in nature. It's just being part of that natural world, and I feel like that sense of place that Josh was talking about. Like this is our ecosystem, our home, and we are part of it, not separate from it. And then I think that was a whole lot of why, y'all. Sorry. So now Josh is gonna go back to where?
Thank you, Doreen. It is titled Why Implants, so that's a very good reason why. There's a lot of reasons why. So on to where are the native plants? I want to start first, mainly talk about our local growers. Mark is one of them here. Does anyone know Mark Morgenstern? If anyone hasn't talked to him, or like buy some native plants? He sources ecotype seed, which is another term on stuff later, but basically plants directly from our region, local Brazilian seed genetics. But I want to talk about a few of these, but Mark is a Morningstar Target Plants. He's out on the southwest side where we're at Spin State Park. I mean, to name a few others, another legend is Edward Doremus out there at Warren, Texas. Anyone know what the Big Thicket is? It's our subtropical rainforest basically out there, the piney woods. Amazing species diversity out there. Check out Watson Rare Native Plant Preserve. That's one of the places I'm going to talk about in terms of where to see them. But our growers need help also because it's kind of a niche market still, but we're trying to grow it. For our last meeting, for this comment, talk about native seed supply chain. So I feel like this is important to introduce to Garen. But please go through this list. It's on our website, and it's got mostly retail nurseries who are reselling the wholesale prices, but they're also providing gardener assistance like the Buchanan's Native Plants. That's where I worked briefly. But then another one I'd like to really call out. Green Star Wetland Plant Farm, thank you. I can't forget. I was just there with a field trip. Not many y'all showed up. Upset me, so I'll forgive you later.
I heard it was a great time.
It was absolutely incredible. Mary Carol Edwards is a wetland ecologist and all around badass, in my opinion. And she's building out the prairie on the east side of it to grow her own seed. That's type of stuff they want us to have, for example. So then we have Bloss too, with Next Door Nursery. I've sourced with him for commercial landscape. He's got now 4 hoop houses. He's grown a lot. So supporting especially our wholesale growers so they continue selling to the retail, which is appealing to all kinds of gardeners from that point. It's really important, and we need more nurseries too. So if you're interested in doing that, talk to us. And I'm interested, particularly in trying to help that initiative grow. It's very important to me, and someone who works in the industry, I have relevant experience and contacts. So ecoregions. So who here is familiar with this map? Show of hands. Good, really good. So this is the big kind of the zooming out here. This is basically the geological identity of by county delineation of what Houston's ecosystems generally look like in grouping. And the plants are largely the same in these areas. So then you have crossovers in these areas where they meet that are called ecotones. A bit more advanced. It's basically a blending zone, but here we are in the Gulf Coast at prairies and marshes. It's light blue or purple color here. It goes all the way down south. Huge difference between this area and where we are here, but there's similarity in geology. So this is kind of the zoom out when we go back. Now we go in, to understand what Houston is. It's geology, it's hydrology, and climate. So these are more, this map is a bit more indicative of what you find and kind of the species diversity and identity of the place. So we have the big thicket, which we talked about, Doremus, there somewhere in the Trinity River. We have the piney woods, which are kind of form ecotones with it, and all throughout, going up to Tyler, Northeast Texas. Trinity bottomlands, so it's basically forest or forested area that floods along the watershed of the Trinity River, like the Minties and Hudson Bay, Lake Livingston, just go skiing there. So Columbia bottomlands, basically the same thing over here, but it has distinctive differences. And I think Mark, you might know, Mark's down in this area, in Fort Bend, Damon area. So it's getting toward that territory, but all throughout and around it is our prairie system. Houston is right in the middle, which is of a giant prairie system with bayous, the darker blue lines here, kind of kind of it's like almost like a cat scratch flowing against it this way, and that is the flow, a directional flow of the water when it floods. And so that is the reason why Houston is one of the most diverse places. What used to be at least.
So the bison that were here were driven, and you can see all the kill zones. Like they drive them here, you see where that Y comes in there? Yeah, you can see it there.
Oh, yeah.
So they drive the bison into this Y. And then be like a 10-foot drop there. And all of these, where you see this, like right here, you find bison kill zone there.
You find
Damon's Mound, because it was steep, they would drive them. When they hit that hill, they couldn't go anywhere. There's 3 kill sites at the base of Damon's Mound, which is basically 1462 and Highway 36.
Thank you so much, Mark. And that is some of the deeper history, but very relevant to the identity of this place. And Dakota, Tonkawa, Kanakawa Indians, Native Americans, they utilize the hydrology and geography of this place just to lay traps for the bison as they came down toward the coast. And you can still find middens or bone piles where they had their religious ceremonies. Some parts along Spring Creek, side of Mark reference. So,
And that's also where our history of burning comes from too, because the native people would burn the prairie, that kept the trees from coming up. And when the fresh, tender new growth came up, that was some yummy stuff, and the bison would follow the path of the bird. So that was kind of how they drove the bison. They would tempt them with good food. Come here, boys. Yeah, so that's how Texas was for millennia before European settlers came.
thank you. It's a very unique place, and this is kind of look at it, the ecoregions, each one, understanding and figuring out, especially if you want to make a wildscape, what kind of plants to plant on it, based on the ones we recommend on our website, by ecoregion. So it's a good guide for you to understand.
Yeah, because soil is aligned with that too, and sand is by the coast. I would love to have some Jacksonia in my garden.
One day.
But I don't have sandy areas because it's a coastal thing. Ray Jacksonia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have Jacksonia, not Ray Jacksonia.
So this one is Texas Parks and Wildlife. This one I got from Houston Wilderness. It's a good one. I share this now.
Yeah. They do, and I like the one that we include because it has county lines, and I'm trying to figure out if something is native to me or not. I need the lines. So, yep, I think. So we spent a lot, we're trying to cover all the who, what, where, when, why, how, and all that. So some basics on how, if you haven't started wildscaping, we really just want you to take some of your lawn, some of that monoculture, and turn it into something that supports life. We had to walk and we had to have areas for our kids to play, and that's fine. But with all of the land in Texas being privately owned, if we could all just take a little bit of our lawn, Doug Talley says half, we could have an enormous amount of biodiversity supported in our world. So, you just, I'm sorry?
Just let the weeds grow.
If your HOA or civic club allows.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, weed is a judgment, because a lot of native things, the 2 summers ago, when we had that 100-degree August, the lawn in my health strip mostly died. And I'm not a girl that's gonna put sod down, so I started planting things in my house strip, some blocks and corner daisy from Hannah, and a whole bunch of other things, and a lot of things come up on their own. Some of it's King Ranch Blues done from across the street, which aggravates me, but a lot of things came up on their own that, Texas dandelion, the long pea name for genus, and I can't remember it, but it's one of my favorite wildflowers. It comes up and it's beautiful, it looks like a dandelion, little brown stamens in the middle, it's adorable, and it was all over my yard. But it's wild, yeah, so you can let some things come up on their own. You can get native plants from Mark or Bloss, or come to meetings and get them for free. Because we have them giveaway plants that people have in their yard. And please don't use pesticides. If you have a healthy ecosystem, the pests, they will control themselves. The ecosystem will supply the controls for your pests. Aphids will get eaten by ladybug larvae, parasitic wasps, hoverfly larvae, lacewing larvae. Things will take care of the pests in your yard. Parasitic wasps will lay eggs in your tomato hornworms. Like it will take care of itself. So don't use pesticides, reduce your lawn, plant natives.
There are many ways how you can help, but first and foremost, plant natives.
Yeah, so you just have to look wherever you have space, wherever you want to start with a native garden. You can start with a very small section if you haven't. And assess the conditions. You have to look at what kind of soil you have, what kind of sun you have, what kind of moisture you have, and you can find a native plant to fit it. We have, based on those ecoregion maps, we have plants that can grow in sun, shade, wet, dry.
We call it generalist. It can do just about anything. And we're like Turk's cap is a really good one.
Yeah, and often those need, the more sun they get, the more water they need. So it's the trade-off. But yeah, if you pick the right plant for the right place, and we can help you connect with people that design things for you and all that good stuff to get started if you need help. Okay. And these are just a snapshot of some resources to learn more. Of course, Native Plant Society to Curvin is a good place to come. But there are a lot of other places if you want to read books, if you want to look at websites, if you want to join Facebook groups, like there's whatever your favorite mode of learning is, there are resources out there, I think, for you. So these are just a few of them. We can probably tell you more if you ask us. So just let us know where you're at. We're here. You can always email the chapter email address and we will help you however we can.
Yeah, one book I really like, that canon was this one by the Wasowski, Sally and Andy Wasowski. The other one is Native Texas Gardens, which does a pretty general landscape design by each Texas bioregion. And looking at the recent one and just really kind of digesting that, really helped me, gave me an inspiration to not just landscaping, but how we can use these plants in it. Really recommend that one. So.
Right, and the last, the last W is when, and that's just now.
Just keep going.
Just do it.
It's getting critical. So.
Take it out. Start, just pick an area. I'm a big fan of sheet mulching, just cover up some grass and kill it and get planted.
Yeah.
Yes, I do pull. I'm a lazy gardener, so I will I want to plant this here and I'll pull some grass and plant it. Mulch around with
But if y'all need help with anything, that's what Doreen and I are here for, our other senior members of Native Plant Society. There's a lot of the groups, but if you have questions, there's no dumb question, I promise. I don't think so, but please reach out to us with anything you need. We are more than happy to help. But yeah, we should start taking some questions.
It's like the city of Houston for this kind of thing. Like the city of Houston owns a lot of land. I mean, do they plant native stuff? Do they support this kind of thing? Do y'all advocate for that?
They said it.
I won't say.
They've just updated their acceptable tree list, right?
So-
To include natives instead of invasives.
Farmers is doing a better job lately. Rachel Reynolds, brand new and show up some more plant swaps, but she got Houston Farmers moving on to updating their native plant and shrub list recently. finally after a very long time, and, the old one is full of stuff like Patinia, Pittosporum, Ligustrum. It only had 2 invasives out of 25, 30 plants. Now they're pushing ones all native, you know, and the generalist tougher stuff that should do well. And acquired plantings for green spaces throughout the Houston, city of Houston, yes. Trees of Houston is also great, yes.
Yeah,
They do a lot of
it is.
good work.
And Houston Parks Board does a lot of.
They did.
Years ago.
Yeah.
We're learning, yeah, everyone's learning and, there's a lot
Yeah.
still don't understand, but
Yeah, and Houston Parks Board does a lot of projects for city and county projects. I used to live in Inwood Forest and they were doing big detention ponds there. And it was like the city owned it, but the county was managing it and doing the dig out for all the excavation for the detention basins. But the Houston Parks Board was gonna come in and do some native plantings. They were really good at that too. As from an individual homeowner perspective, you can also apply for a natural area permit from the city of Houston for your home. Is that what we're gonna say? So you can apply for that.
Stop you from growing native.
Yes.
Even if you have an HOA, you cannot stop.
Yeah.
There's a state law that was only a few years old, I think, that an HOA cannot prevent you from using water saving landscaping.
Yeah.
Or some people call it xeriscaping, but I don't water my native plants like ever. I started that 100-degree August, like halfway through the month. I felt bad for the pollinators because I know a lot was blooming, but the plants all made it through and there were big cracks in the ground and swelling up things, but
You online, go to the Texas Property Code and enter the word for water saving plants. Sorry, I can't think of it.
xeriscaping,
Xeriscape or xeriscape, yeah. And
XERI.
you will find the sections of the code right there.
Yes, thank you, Wally. Other questions? Lovey?
Fire ant.
suggestions that your fire ants. You can pour molten aluminum on top of their, and make a beautiful work of art through their tunnels.
I've seen that.
And
That's
then
pretty
sell
awesome.
it to, you know, create a market for destroying fire ants.
What I use,
Yeah, marketing.
Any product with spinosad, which is an organic compound, will kill the fire ants. So I buy this Captain Jack's dead rubber brew. Put 2 little scoops into a 2-gallon, and we can do it right in the vegetable garden without worrying about poisoning yourself.
Yeah, I have it in my
I use orange oil with like a drop of dish soap and I just dredge the mound. But there are lots of different methods people like to put blasts in it. I mean, any of those things are going to be indiscriminate killers, so just try to apply them just to the mound. If you can avoid them running down your sidewalk and across all your other buggies, but they are vicious.
Questions?
Two things, my neighbor works for Harris County Flood Control, and they just put in a rain garden somewhere around 11th and Chester, somewhere it's, and it's really pretty. Also about leaving leaves and letting them decompose, I have a live oak, and I've always heard that because they're so thick, it takes them a long time to break down, and also that they're toxic for a lot of plants, is that true?
No, I think the most common issue, well, okay, anybody can chime in because I am not an expert on everything, or very many things. I think it's mostly that they cover up and smother things and the sun doesn't get through them. But I like that, I have a huge live oak in my backyard and a smaller, younger one in the front yard. And I don't ever pick up my leaves. I have flower beds in most places. Some of them can be allelopathic too, and they can create too much ground cover for seeds to germinate. But other trees do have more allelopathic properties like walnuts or pecans. You have to be careful what you plant under them because it may kill things. I found a really cool list from somewhere out east that I kind of adopted and looked for like genus names that I knew, and I assumed that those would be okay. So I've been experimenting with that, but I plant things underneath my oaks. I have inland sea oats and pigeonberry and coralberry. July grass, and all kinds of things growing under my oaks, and they seem to be just fine. Someone else had some comments? Yeah.
The only thing about a lot of leaves under the oak is that it holds moisture. So make sure you pick up your branches because termites think that's a great habitat. So make sure any big branch over an inch that you take that away under without your leaf.
That's a good point.
Oaks are a keystone species, and so a lot of caterpillars and insects depend on oaks, and they fall once they after whatever they fall into the soil around the oaks, and we need all those caterpillars to feed the food web. So
Does everybody know what she means by keystone species? Anybody need an explanation of keystone species? Yeah, okay. So I don't know if Talmy coined that or someone else, but it basically are species that are like the keystone in an arch that are central to the existence of all the things around it. So I could use a graphic, but in an arch, before they had whatever we use for building now, there was a keystone on the top that holds everything together.
Cool documentary to watch about it, not necessarily the plant, but the wolves of Yellowstone, about how their reintroduction of wolves to predate the elk and other ruminant herbivores basically changed the shape of the rivers over time.
Yeah,
It's pretty amazing stuff. So basically,
Yeah,
any
that's cool.
species that contributes the most to the balance of the system,
Yeah.
either top down or in the case of trees, well, they're ancient, so it's just different with plants. But
Yeah. And Talmy worked with National Wildlife Federation, and there's a plant finder on the NWF website that actually shows the amount of species that they support. So you can actually look up, and it will show a few examples of plants in the area. It's not a comprehensive list by any means, but it will tell you that oaks in our area support 500 and something species of Lepidoptera, of butterflies and moths. There are a lot of moths out there that we don't even know about because they're active at night, but they are out there. They are still food sources for our birds and everything. So like oaks and then maples next and
they need the leaf litter.
they do.
Pupae.
Yes, they fall on that and that's where they live until they evolve. You ever seen those polyphemus moths? They're like that big. Those live in leaf litter.
Any more questions?
I want to make an announcement. Okay.
Okay, other questions before we get to announcements? Lan?
Talk about city making talent.
Questions, comments? Was this fun? Did you all learn something even if you thought you knew things ahead of time?
Honest feedback, you can tell us if we're terrible.
Yeah.
She's gonna make an announcement about it. Sorry.
Okay, no other questions? Okay, thanks for playing along. So now Sharon, I know.
I'd like to see so many new faces here this evening. Harris County Flood Control planted 1,500 feet of wildflowers in 50-pound bags from the Native Americans. In 2021, you just need to ask to have them put on your bayou, on the slopes of your bayou. And so it gives us the opportunity to have an event. To this year's our second year. And Memorial Hermann Hospital Southwest is sponsoring us again because they have a program called Exercise is Medicine. So we will be having biking, line dancing, the Native Plant Society, Peggy and Susie will be there. And uniquely, we're having stories on the bayous past because the cemetery along this trail just received a historic Texas cemetery designation. It's an 1889 cemetery and it's never had a memorial. So there's a lot going on. It's Saturday, the 26th. Houston Audubon and the new president, Jed, will be there at 8:30. And then the other events take place at 8. So come on out.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
especially for so many new people in here. You should know that the Native Plant Society of Texas website and esot.org has a searchable database where you can find plants for your area and your needs, shade, sun, wet, tree, ground cover, whatever. And in addition, we also have a series of classes and you can earn certification with those classes. And in Houston right now, in May 3rd, you could take level 1, which is a prerequisite to level 2 and 3. So do that. It's either in person in Clear Lake or via Zoom. In person's almost sold out, but you can always take the Zoom. And then there's the level 4 class, which is about stewardship of native plant communities, like larger ecosystems. And that is in a little bit later in May. So it's May 17th. Via Zoom or in person at U of H Clear Lake. And you can take level 2, which is about designing your native landscape in at Mercer Arboretum a little bit later in May. And it is almost sold out. So if you want to do these things, register for the level 1, then you can register for the level 2 and get that done.
It's because I've been through the series and got the certification, so. Yes, Bob.
So online, Annie Wong wants to know what is the average maintenance for a native plant garden?
Oh, that is a fun question.
Nuanced.
Yeah, nuanced. So I would say that it is and Josh is gonna have way different kind of input than I will, but I will say it's just a different kind of maintenance. Whereas a lot of other plants that are not native, you have to really fight to keep them alive. And with natives it is more keeping the aesthetic that you want, because they are native, they're wild, and they are gonna do what they wanna do. So there are some that are annual, and we'll see cracks in your sidewalk. If you don't want them there, you gotta pluck them out. But it's a much more enjoyable, I think, kind of maintenance, and so you get to see all the critters out there as well. And Josh is gonna come up with some commercial landscaping stuff.
Oh,
Or some.
we really haven't really figured out how to do maintenance of prairie systems that well, but it's still something we're learning how to do. There are definitely some restoration firms that have figured out fit better, but it's a lot of work and knowing what species to remove. You know, managing invasives is the hardest part of the prairie because it's in full sun. And, you know, it's a evolving process. It's something that, you know, if you really want to learn more about, get in touch with, what's his name, Thomas Taylor Landscaping, different contractors who know what they're doing. RT's Garden Beds is another. And anyone here, you know, some of our senior members want to learn how to do that, just please feel free to approach us, and we have a combination of knowledge that will point you in the right direction, so.
And maintaining your native landscape is why people bring plants to share.
Also wildscapes.
Wildscapes. Oh, yeah, we rose wildscapes. So there are a lot of firms out there that are starting to do this, but it's still kind of a young market, a young practice for people to do this in their yards. There are people out there who've been doing it themselves for years, but businesses doing it are still a little newer. But I think it's fun. I would spend all my time in my garden if I could. Yes.
When you start work.
Yeah. Hannah works at Rice and is loves the seed bank, and they have some prairies, pocket prairies, and all kinds of good things going on at Rice.
I have one more comment on this last thing about, about how much maintenance and work and things like that. If you have a public garden, you would need, my advice is before you start the public garden, find out your group of volunteers that would be willing to come once a month to clean it up. Because it really takes work, because it's a garden and you want to look at a certain way.
Yeah.
So anyway, right now I got an announcement. How many of you have done City Nature Challenge before in past years? Okay, not everybody. So raise your hand if you've done it before. Okay, look around you and see who has done it and ask them about it, okay? Because City Nature Challenge, it's a worldwide contest, and it starts April 25th and it goes, okay, you can start taking pictures of living organisms April 25th to April 28th. and post it on iNaturalist. If you take it within the greater Houston area, it'll automatically be, in the Houston, City Nature Challenge, part. And then you can take those pictures between those times, has to be dated, like in your, camera, but then you can post them or upload them to your computer. If you didn't, upload them when you're taking the pictures, you can take a bunch of pictures and upload them later between April 29th and May 4th. And it's a contest with, between over 600 global cities that are competing, and you're competing on 3 categories: most observations, which city has the most number of species, and which city has the most number of observers. Houston has never beaten other Texas cities in most observations and observers. So please join. If you just take one picture, you will be added as the number of observers, okay? So all you have to do is take one picture and upload it to iNaturalist. However, Houston has always ranked in the top 5 in the world in the last 5 years, in the top 5 in the world in the last 5 years for the number of species. So it's a contest. Get your, what? Yeah, phones ready, and there are, let's see. At Deer Park Prairie on that Saturday, I think it's the 26th or something like that. At night, there's Moth Night, run by Mary Spoyer and her moth posse. And the last day of Next City Nature Challenge, which is the 28th on Monday night, go to CPC, Coastal Prairie Conservancy's Indian Grass Preserve, and they're gonna have black lights and things like that. You can go a little bit earlier, like I think they opened at 7, and you can take pictures on the prairie there. Yes.
I have
Yes.
Jesse H. Jones is doing a guided hike on Saturday, the 26th for the City Nature Challenge from 9 to 12. Okay. It's in Humboldt.
I had an awesome nature visit.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I did great work up there. Also, if you haven't gone mothing, you haven't lived yet.
There are not any other questions or announcements? We can have people talk about the plants that they brought to give away. Anybody else with announcements or, oh, Mark? Oh, for our lucky winners.
Is everybody signed in here to win a Buckeye tree?
Oh, just let them have it.
Okay,
I don't want
so pick a number from 1 to 45.
Yes, of course.
1 to 45. Yeah. 46.
Yeah, no.
26, Lynn Schwab.
It is native here.
Yes.
Okay. There's a field at one of the sites I collect at. I'm a mosquito researcher.
Okay.
So, yeah, so.
Alan. I want a Buckeye tree.
Yeah, Alan.
And thank you, Alan, for all the food.
Okay, 1 to 45.
I was gonna try to propagate like by taking some clippings and from a site that will not miss it.
It's
Are you sure that's
Beth?
native? Because
I
Heritage.
am not, no, and it's just the
Yeah.
leaves and tendrils at this point, so it looks like any.
there's non-native, but the non-native doesn't get fruit. So if you fruit, you're good. The Granada has in the non-native, you have 3 or 5. So if you see any leaves with 5 lobes, that's not. If you see fruit, you're good. If everything is three leaves, you're good. If you
Is that
see
all
one,
we're
good.
about
Well, I don't have a yard right now,
So
so I
these are up for grabs.
but I figured I would propagate, so I figured
Oh, yeah.
bring them.
One more.
so that other people can have them. I got mason jars, I got rooting, like, might as well try.
Yeah.
Alright, so yeah, I'll look for,
We'll see.
make sure it's preloaded consistently across them, and then.
Rest of these plants are for grabs. I know Hannah brought some blocks.
Yeah.
Looks like there's gold vervain, number of different mints, inland sea oats, and was that lancelet, lancelet, coreopsis, yeah. So, have at it, people.
Bushy glue stem also.
Bushy glue stem, and real poke on the riders, good one.
No.
Thank you all for coming, really appreciate it. Plant native.